Listen, I mean, look, flooding is a terrible thing, and when it happens, it's devastating. But, you know, there's such a thing called nature, and sadly, it sometimes rains a lot, sea levels, rivers rise, and some houses get flooded. That's happened forever. What's changed?
Well, I mean, the Met Office in this particular story is talking about the fact that climate change has had an effect on this, and that's driven a lot of those million extra homes into the listing from the Environment Agency. I mean, when we look at the water pressures, though, let's say around the world that are being exacerbated by climate change, we've seen the Dubai floods, 6 to 12 months ago. We've seen the Valencia floods in more recent history in both cases, with 6 to 12 months worth of rain falling in just a few hours. And now we're seeing this increase in risk here, which, as you said, is going to go up to almost 1 in 4 of our homes prior to the 2050s. I mean, and this is post a big government effort going, finishing in about 2022, 6 years of increasing our flood defences, in which government is saying that we're now, 5% better off than we were then. Well, that was 5% better off in 2022. And now we've got another million homes at risk, and that's going to go up by another 2 million.
So this is based on if the weather continues to do what it's currently doing.
Yeah, it continues to do, and let's say those effects continue to be felt and accelerate. So it's not that it stays as it is now and gets a bit better. It's based on, we can see where it's going. It's been shown where it's going. We've followed the trends for the last couple of decades, and we're reckoning that it's going to go up to 8 million homes and 1 in 4, in the next, by 2050.
How can we be sure, and this isn't about climate change denial or anything, Ed, but it's just a reasonable question. How can we be sure that it's to do with climate? I mean, climate changes, but there is a real kind of sense of when we talk about climate change, we talk about it as if it's something that is new to this epoch, that this is, clearly down to us driving the wrong cars or whatever. It's got that sort of added on emphasis. It could just be that it's climate change, right? And nothing more than that.
Yeah, yes. And look, there is no denial in saying there's always been climate change.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct, isn't it? So, but it's about the question of, is it accelerating? Is it being caused by us? And is it going to become a much wilder problem? Well, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. And it's the scientists have been looking at it. And I know we talk about the odd scientist who might not say this, but it really is the odd one. I mean, the tens of thousands that sign these reports, or the hundreds that work on them in IPCC cases, are telling us we've got a problem with climate change. In the story we started with, the Met Office itself, so our weather agency, full of scientists and data analysts, is actually telling us exactly the same thing. So there is a problem, and it's been getting worse. That's not saying it never existed. Now, having said that, what should we be doing about it? I mean, that's really the thing that comes down to it. Should we ignore it, say it's always been happening, or should we get on and do something about it? And I think the best way to look at this, which seems to bring everybody on, and I've clearly, as you might imagine, had a lot of conversations about this, both with real climate deniers and with those that are desperate for us to do it because we're all going to die tomorrow, the whole lot. But I think when we come back and say, what do we all want? And you have talked about this on your show at different times, so whether it's cleaner air, healthier lifestyles, better environment, greener fields, etc., we all want that. But on top of that, there's a massive opportunity. Look, the entire world is starting to deal with this. 93% of the world's GDP is now under a net zero commitment. It is a direction of travel. The 2 biggest economies in the world, China is minting it on this at the moment, making solar panels, wind turbines, batteries, dominating EVs, dominating the production of rare earth metals and minerals. And when we look across the pond to America, $369 billion of investment in the Inflation Reduction Act that is crowdfunding in masses of private investment and taking British companies, innovative British companies from Britain, relocating over to America so they can say they're American, based in America, and get their whatever it is, their hands on this money. This is a big opportunity.
Well, I mean, a couple of points here. Why is it getting, assuming then that you said yes as to one of the questions about, is it man-made, is it our fault? Given that we live far more environmentally considerate lifestyles than we've ever done, is this the legacy from previous man-made damage now kicking in? Because a lot of people would be quite surprised to think, our planet, certainly this country, is unrecognisable in many ways from what it was, say, 20 years ago, in terms of the kind of cars we drive, how we construct buildings, how we live, recycling, initiatives, low traffic neighbourhoods. I mean, the list goes on. Nobody could say it's worse today than it was in 1978, right?
Yep. I mean, I think the point about it is yes, it's been changing in this country. On the science, and I wouldn't labour it to some extent, I'd come to the common ground that we can all agree on, but on the science, it's a worldwide problem. So the temperatures are going to go up if everybody keeps polluting. What you and I can affect is the UK and the environment around us here. What the UK should be doing, and it's interesting because Reform voters, just to take they particularly are the largest group that are suggesting that climate change is not an issue. But when you talk to even Reform voters and you talk to them about the economic opportunity, the opportunity to grow our GDP, to reverse 50 or 70 years of decline, 1970s, one third of our GDP came from manufacturing and industry. It's now under 10%. We're now seeing in the last couple of months a 0.1% negative growth of our economy. And we've got a projection from the Office of Budget Responsibility that our debt is going to triple by the 2070s. Now, that's all happening now. If we want to reverse that, and if Labour, give them a good kick, but if what Labour wants to do is grow our economy for us, which they've talked about, what have we got to do? We've got to jump on the bandwagon of the biggest trends that are happening in the entire world. One is dealing with net zero. It's a massive commercial opportunity. The other's AI. And in terms of net zero, it means bring forward the target, be confident that that market is out there, get Britain at the front of those innovation cycles, do what we do best. Oxford, Cambridge, our innovation centres and all that sort of things, they are still functioning brilliantly. But where we're suffering is in those smaller companies that are suddenly not getting the funding. They're moving abroad, or they do their manufacturing in China, and we're not getting that secondary benefit from all of that investment we put in this country. If we went for it on net zero, if we get there in 2030, or we get there wildly before the others, we will spend decades selling on to the others. And just before you come in there, just one bit of it would be to say, look, getting to net zero between now and 2050 is being seen as a cost. That's what everybody talks about as a cost. And the Climate Change Committee has put it at under 0.9% of GDP per year. But if we do it immediately, it doesn't actually mean that it jumps to 30% of GDP. It does jump a bit, but we get all the job done now, and then we've got an upside. And the projections are also not showing massive upside if we get there in 2050, because everybody's doing it at the same time, and we're going to pay China for everything as we on our journey. If we do it now, there is a massive upside which will come afterwards, because everybody will need what we've done. It stands to reason. The man in the street seems to get it. And when I've campaigned in the street, thousands of conversations, people have said to me, why is it the politicians don't get it? It seems so obvious. This is the new industrial revolution. Let's lead it, do it early, roll our sleeves up, make money.
There it is. Ed, thank you very much. As ever, Ed Gemmell is leader of the Climate Party. I know there, just on that last point, that's the bit that sort of intrigues me, is that this is, look, this does sound a bit tinfoil hat, but I've long believed that no one is discounting climate change. You'd have to be a nutter if you didn't recognise that climate changes. The nub of the argument is how much of it is just nature doing what it does and how much of it is because of stuff we've done as humans. Now, obviously, we'll have an effect on some things. Does it change the weather? Does it change the meteorological ecosystem to such a degree that people have to start moving around the planet because they can no longer live in certain territories because it's so hot, and it's only so hot because of our driving cars and stuff over the years? That's the area where there is a genuine divide of opinion on that, and that doesn't divvy out between scientists and clever people and morons, because on the other side of that, a lot of scientists and clever people as well, who aren't even saying, look, this is nonsense, and merely throwing the question out there in a very reasonable way, which is what I've tried to do for years, just throwing the question. A lot of things are not adding up. They're not adding up that the Armageddon doomsday scenario has a very sort of almost voluntary reaction to it. We'd like some initiatives. Whereas COVID had a sort of compulsory reaction to it. So governments went, look, we're all going to die if we catch this thing called COVID. So, you know, we're going to lock down, and, you know, turned out didn't need to do hardly any of that, if any of it at all. But this, which apparently is far worse, is sort of fairly optional. You know, you want to start selling cars, you can still sell the bad cars if you want, even though they're killing the planet. It's kind of that doesn't make a whole heap of sense to many people. But I have long believed that we've sort of run out of stuff to invent in the digital world. I mean, there's AI coming around the corner. And the Green Revolution, there are some very staunch Republicans, or there certainly used to be an it was called something like Republicans for the Environment. And what they were essentially was a business thinking organisation. I don't even know if they were, you know, I don't think they had a headquarters. I think it was just a way of looking at something, who thought, if there's money and dollars in their green hills, we're going to have some of it, which I think was the point that Ed was saying there. But are we just starting an industry for the sake of starting an industry? Do we need the additional industry? Paul says the Environment Agency needs to restart dredging rivers. Councils need to clear culvert and drainage systems. This one from Reg, with all this global warming and rain falling, why are we not digging a few more reservoirs out and saving?